The SR3350 3000 sheet staple saddle stitch finisher offers saddle stitch binding for high-quality finish and legibility, and staple binding or stapleless binding depending on the application and number of sheets used. Booklets are ejected from the saddle stitch tray, and up to 50 copies can be loaded. Stapleless binding binds the papers without using a staple and ejects it to the shift tray. The stapleless binding unit strongly crimps the stapleless unit type M52 so that it can be bound tightly. The SR3350 3000 sheet staple saddle stitch finisher uses a variety of technologies to achieve a neat finish for saddle stitch binding and strong binding strength for stapleless binding. For saddle stitch binding output, the papers are fed from the top and saddle stitched with a staple at the midpoint. Then it is valley folded by rollers and ejected. The saddle shape rollers that pass before ejecting the papers are the mechanism that makes the difference in the finished output. The saddle shape rollers can reduce the thickness of the binding by clamping the papers and pressing hard from the top and bottom during the folds of the binding. With the stapleless binding unit captures and crimps the transported papers for binding. The teeth of the stapleless binding have unique tooth geometry for precise crimping of the papers. By setting papers in the stapleless binding unit, the papers are clamped from the top and bottom and then crimped and pressed to bind the papers. For staple binding, the staple binding unit is activated and the staple binding unit automatically replaces the stapleless binding unit to bind the papers with a stapler needle and ejects it. Using these technologies, the SR3350 3000 sheet staple saddle stitch finisher achieves highly accurate binding and saddle stitch binding.